Hello, I'm Sean Lambert, and today I'm going to be talking about my new game, Crimea, Conquest and Liberation, which I just got from MMP down in Maryland. So my interest in OCS, of which Crimea is the newest part of, technically, until Forgotten Battles comes out, is primarily in that I discovered that I enjoyed watching Callendale play DAC. So that was kind of my first exposure to OCS, and I had heard the name thrown around a bit, but my interest really was piqued by DAC. So I have played a bit of DAC, probably like 5 to 10 turns in various scenarios, but it is a bit of a slog to learn OCS from DAC because it's all on Vassal, and I can't afford to just go out and drop $350 or $400 on DAC. So anyway, DAC was my first toe in the water, and I was playing with the new OCS rules, not the original DAC rules, or even the rules as they were when DAC 2 came out. So I was playing with the most updated rules. But DAC is also a different animal. It has a lot of game-specific rules that are completely different, especially the lack of rail, and the supply system is all based around trucks. So the meat and potatoes of OCS really plays differently in DAC. But it was a great game, so I really enjoyed playing it. But I also wanted to try something more traditional. Now, Crimea is interesting because it's a small game. It is only a one-map game. And on top of that, it is a part of the war that I'm pretty interested in, and an area of the world that I'm very interested in. I think the wars throughout the years on Crimea are very interesting. I've been working on a Crimean, 19th century Crimean War game about the war in the 1850s. Over the years, Crimea has seen a lot of conflict, and a lot of very unique conflict. It tends to bring out the amphibious operations, and even in the 19th century, we had amphibious operations from the combined might of a British, French, Italian coalition. So Crimea is an interesting place to have a conflict. Its terrain is really interesting, a very mountainous southern portion, a very flat central area, and then you have the complicating factor of the Savage region, which was viewed as kind of impassable by the Germans and by pretty much everyone else in the world. But one of the keys in the liberation of Crimea was that the Soviets were able to deal with it with some very skillful and unique tactics. But from a more operational standpoint, it's an area that poses unique challenges because the entry into Crimea is constricted on both ends. From the Russian side, you have the Kerch Peninsula, which during the winter can freeze over, but in general it's ocean. The left side, you have the entry point into Crimea, which is also very interesting and very constricted. So it can tend towards these nice, really fortified regions that then have to be subverted in some way. And the story of Crimea is a story of sieges and subversion of defenses, more than it is open, maneuver warfare. And so to me, it is an interesting war from that standpoint. And so since this is my first OCS game, I thought I would try to film myself opening it up and saying what I think about the components. First of all, it's a very light box, unlike some other purchases I've made recently. Most Fearful Sacrifice comes to mind, being a good 13 pounds. This was much cheaper to ship, and in general it will be easier to store because it will fit on a normal shelf. You see here, series designer is Dean Essig. He is responsible for the entire series as a whole. But even as this game was made, the game designers in this game were split between the 1941 and 42 scenario, which was done by Guy, and then the 43, 44 scenarios were done by Tony. So the game development and design kind of was smashed together. It was originally envisaged as a part of a larger Ostfront series. And now we are with the final pre-release of the Forgotten Battles. We are 3 out of 5, I think. I think there's going to be 5 total games in this series. So this is an important piece if you're trying to collect them all, which I'm not. I'm not really interested in playing the combined campaign because just the space requirements alone are infeasible for me. But I would love to play it at a convention or something. So it's a very beautiful piece of artwork on the box. And the game itself, like I said, it's a one-map game, so it is a little bit smaller, which is great for me. You get the series rules, which you can also download from the website, as well as the scenario rules and game rules. So there's three books that you get with it. The scenario rules are really light. I should say the game-specific rules are really light in this case, much more so than in DAC. And in DAC, you had 3 books just dedicated to scenarios and games. So this is just 2. But it does have some unique rules that were added. Some of them are for combined play only. So even as this came out, it was already planned that this was going to be combined with other games. So in this case, there's a lot of references to Third Winter, because the Third Winter map is directly to the north of the Crimea map. So these are the counters for the Russians. So you have armies, fronts, and I believe corps markers as well. But they're really nicely printed. A lot better than I was expecting, actually. Very nice. And a lot of kind of game-specific unique counters here, like the coastal ready counter, and then the offensive versus basically the idea of the combined operation. If you were to combine Crimea and the other games of the Ostfront series, the idea is that you have certain fronts preparing actions versus going on the offensive. So you can't just do an entire broad front strategy constantly. So the fronts themselves can have different modes. Kind of like how units can have modes in OCS, the fronts can also have modes. And then you have your regular OCS charts and sequence of play, an abbreviated sequence of play, I should say. But this particular player aid is really, really good. I've played a lot with it, so it's a good little chart. Gives you everything you need and pretty much nothing you don't, although you don't always need the air transport stuff. That could probably be on a separate chart. And then this is a very small Axis-specific table. You pretty much only have Axis-specific rules for replacements and supply. So really, especially compared to DAC, this is a lot smaller. It's a lot more faction-specific rules in DAC. And then we have a player display, which is, I like that they include this and don't try to stuff it on the map. A lot of the older entries into OCS try to put everything on the map, but I like having the displays off to the side personally, because then you could put it on a separate table, or even, you know, track it in a log sheet and put the counters back in their bags and their storage. Then we have a terrain effects chart, and this one looks a lot nicer than I was expecting. I didn't realize how updated the graphics on this were. This is a really beautiful terrain chart. The terrain effects in OCS can seem really complicated the first time you play them, because they have these terrain categories of open, close, very close, extremely close. You know, it's hard to tell what all that stuff means when you're first learning and how it's going to impact you. But over time, it definitely gets easier. And then as far as movement effects go, I like the color coding here. I think that's really a nice touch. Definitely older entries in this series did not have that color coding going on. So here's some more counters. This looks like mostly Axis counters. We have our Romanian friends here, of which there are many. There's a lot of Romanians in these scenarios, because that's kind of what was involved at the time. Remember, we're starting in case blue in the first couple scenarios, and then on the way back out, it's still Romanians. So there are quite a few Romanians. And then we have a lot of really unique counters. This Sevastopol here is a Russian battleship that you get victory points for destroying or damaging. So it's kind of a cool little add-on. Soviet player aid is basically the same, except they also have the amphibious table. So they do have some amphibious capabilities. And then we get the scenario book, also known as the playbook. And there are a bunch of scenarios, although the scenario 4 is not really an applicable scenario for my purposes because I don't have Third Winter. If you did have Third Winter and you wanted to play with the January 2644 setup, you would need this scenario. So it's only included for that purpose, just to link with the other game. And there's quite a few linking rules that you don't really have to worry about if you're just playing Crimea. And it's nice that they give you 2 terrain effects charts. I like that. I like when games give you enough stuff that you can actually play it 2 players. Imagine that. This is another player display. So I guess the Soviets have a little bit more going on, and their display is like 1.5 pages instead of just 1 page. Don't know why they're different, but they are. Then we got the just series markers. If you've played any OCS, you'll be familiar with these. So 1 SP, which is the little fuel and boxes, equals 4T. So that's an important basic math kind of thing that you're always worried about. These are step loss counters, also very important. So, I mean, those are pretty standard to the series. If you played any of the games, you will be familiar with those. Before I look at the map, just wanted to point out they do include another set of charts and tables. Again, you can actually play this right out of the box 2 players, which is perfect. I like that. I like that a lot. Because A Most Fearful Sacrifice, a game much more expensive than Crimea, does not include enough player aids to actually play it 2 players. And so you got to pass them back and forth. The series rules are a little chonky, but in terms of, you know, complicated series rules, they're really not that bad. They're pretty easy to follow, and for the most part, you're using this as more of a reference. You can learn the game. I would say you can learn most of a game by just starting and playing, and then looking stuff up based on the player aid. obviously you want to give the, counter rules. So like the first, I would say getting up through, I don't know, maybe page 13, you have enough that you can kind of get through most of your first turn. And then from there, you would kind of reference things as they come up. I don't know. I'm not sure the best way to learn OCS. Now, there is an OCS YouTube channel that someone just started a few months ago. And that's actually really good. They give some good play-by-plays, but at the same time, then you're dedicating, I don't know how many hours they have up there, but it's a fair amount. It's like a good, probably 12 hours of content you have to get through to be somewhat competent. I think you could do better by working with the materials that you get in the box and then going online. But some people like to just jump straight to the videos. So the most important thing to understand in any game is how the counters actually work. You can see here the counters are pretty busy in some ways, but they do give you enough information that you can play the game as long as you understand how the counters work. So the stuff that's normal is like movement allowance and combat strength. But there's a lot of color coding pieces in OCS. So if you notice here, white means leg MPs, red means track MPs. So those have special advantages over leg and truck. And then black is truck MPs. Action ratings are kind of like a quality rating. So those are very important. The RE size, this RE stands for regimental equivalent. And most supply costs are tracked in regimental equivalents. So that yellow number is very important. And combat strength, I think, is pretty obvious. As far as symbology goes, they use NATO symbols, but then they will color code them based on whether or not they're armor, mechanized, or regular. The exceptions to those colors are many, and in fact, in OCS, they add additional, in Crimea, they add additional colors onto that. So if we look at the stripes on some of these Soviet guys, so these Soviet IL-2s here, that indicates that they are part of the Coastal Front's air units. Oops, there we go. So the blue stripe, see how they all line up together? That means they're all under the coastal front. So you could see that even some of these get further augmented over what they start with already being relatively highly color coded. But in general, when you're looking at the counters, what you're looking for is the little box, the colored boxes, and the color of the writing itself. So that kind of tells you that it's not infantry, it's something special. And I really like the color coding system. I think it in general, when you're looking at it from far away, so like, from back here, you can still tell what your tank units are and stuff, even if you can't quite read the NATO symbols. You could see the color further away. So I do think the color coding is helpful. The map now, take a look at the quality of the map and the size of the map. I already talked about it's only a one map, so I'm not going to open the whole thing up, but I wanted to just point out that how high quality this map actually is. So it might not come across well in Vassal or in other people's videos, but the resolution on this map and the print quality is actually incredibly good. So I think if you do end up buying this game, I realize it's been a year since it came out, so it's maybe not quite as hot as it was. But if you do have any interest in OCS, I think just purely on quality standpoint, I would recommend it. Now, we'll have to see how it plays. It might be a slog. I have heard people say it's very World War I-esque, like you can get kind of caught up in the corners, but I'm kind of interested in that side of things, so I don't mind it being a little slower paced. And my main goal is really to just get better at playing the system, and playing the system in the area in which it was meant to be played. And I think that the OCS system in general is really designed for the Eastern Front. A lot of the series-specific rules make the most sense in the context of the Eastern Front. And so playing something like DAC, where the realities of the theater cause you to need a lot of exceptions to the base rules, probably wasn't the best starting point for me. So I don't feel like I have learned the system all that well. And that's my biggest goal, is to actually learn the system. So, till next time, see ya.